In 2022, Meta's internal data showed that most users who entered Horizon Worlds never came back. Leadership saw the numbers. They kept spending anyway. Over the next 3 years, they added another $50 billion to the pile. This is not a story about a company that didn't know it was failing. It's a story about one that knew and couldn't stop. When fear becomes a strategy. To understand why Meta burned through $83 billion chasing a virtual frontier that almost no one wanted to visit, you have to understand the specific anxiety driving the man who wrote the checks. Mark Zuckerberg had built the world's dominant social network, yet he did not actually own the ground it stood on. Every time someone opened Facebook or Instagram on an iPhone, Apple controlled the experience. Google did the same on Android. They wrote the rules, extracted their percentage, and could rewrite the terms at will. A leaked internal email from 2015 showed Zuckerberg explaining this vulnerability to his own executives in plain terms. His company's future was hostage to platforms he had no hand in building. That fear was not irrational. It was, in fact, precisely correct. In April 2021, Apple deployed a single software update, App Tracking Transparency, that allowed iPhone users to block apps from tracking their behavior across the web. Most users opted out immediately. The financial consequence for Meta was severe. Zuckerberg told investors this one update would erase roughly $10 billion in annual revenue. To frame the scale of that loss, it exceeded the entire annual economic output of Iceland. The fear was legitimate. The question was whether the response made any sense. The idea borrowed from a dystopia. The word Metaverse did not originate in a boardroom or a Silicon Valley whiteboard session. It came from a 1992 science fiction novel called Snow Crash, written by Neil Stephenson. In Stephenson's telling, the metaverse was a place people fled to because the physical world had collapsed around them, a refuge built on despair, not ambition. For 3 decades, that concept remained precisely where it belonged, inside fiction. Then Zuckerberg encountered it and saw something different. He saw infrastructure. In 2014, he paid $2 billion for Oculus, a virtual reality startup that had generated genuine enthusiasm in gaming circles. At the time, Facebook was a social media company with no hardware experience and no obvious path into the headset business. The acquisition made sense only if you understood that Zuckerberg was not buying a product. He was purchasing the early scaffolding of a platform he intended to own outright. By October 2021, 2 forces had converged to make the announcement feel urgent. The Apple revenue hit was fresh, and Facebook's public reputation had been systematically dismantled. First, by the Cambridge Analytica revelation in 2018, which showed that data belonging to 87 million users had been harvested for political targeting. Then, by internal whistleblower documents in September 2021, demonstrating that company leadership had been aware its platforms were causing measurable harm to young people and had prioritized growth regardless. On October 28, 2021, Zuckerberg announced the company would now be called Meta. Consider what it actually means to rename a company you built from a dormant college project into a platform used by 3 billion people. Facebook was not just a brand. It was Zuckerberg's identity, the thing that had defined every year of his adult life. Replacing that name with a word borrowed from a dystopian novel was not a marketing decision. It was a declaration. He was telling the world, and perhaps himself, that everything he had built until that moment was now merely the foundation for something larger. The problem with declarations of that scale is that they leave no room for retreat. Once you rename the company, you cannot quietly shelve the idea. You can only double down or collapse publicly. Zuckerberg had eliminated the middle option before the product had shipped a single unit. A product that answered a question nobody asked. Horizon Worlds launched in the United States and Canada in December 2021. The premise was straightforward: a social virtual reality platform where users could construct spaces, attend events, and interact as three-dimensional avatars, accessed through a $299 headset. Meta projected 500,000 monthly active users by the end of 2022. By February of that year, they had 300,000. The number never climbed higher. For reference, Roblox was registering over 50 million daily active users. Fortnite was pulling 80 million monthly players. VR Chat, assembled by a small independent studio with a fraction of Meta's resources, reportedly had more simultaneous users at any given moment than Horizon Worlds could sustain across its entire network. The users who did arrive encountered a world that was difficult to defend. Avatars had no lower body. From the waist down, users simply hovered. The visual quality was roughly comparable to consumer games from 2 decades prior. One internal test by a reporter for The Verge produced a verdict that became widely circulated. The experience was so degraded, so fundamentally broken, that most employees who were required to use it for meetings quietly returned to conventional video calls within weeks. In August 2022, Zuckerberg posted an image of himself inside the platform to celebrate its expansion into France and Spain. The image traveled widely, though not for any reason Meta's communications team would have chosen. The virtual recreation of the Eiffel Tower behind him appeared assembled from a free asset library circa 2003. The response was not kind. But here is the detail that reframes everything that came next. At the precise moment Meta's internal surveys showed most users were abandoning the platform after a single visit, the company was not scaling back. It was accelerating. The budget for Reality Labs in 2022 was larger than the year before. The question worth sitting with is simple. What does a leadership team see in data like that and decide to spend more?
The man who built Doom walked out the door. John Carmack had seen the future of computing before almost anyone else alive. In 1993, his engine for Doom redefined what personal computers could render. In 1999, Quake demonstrated that real-time 3D environments could feel physical, tactile, genuinely inhabitable. When he joined Oculus in 2013, a year before Facebook's acquisition, he did so because he believed virtual reality was the next legitimate frontier. Not a marketing concept, a genuine shift in how humans would interact with digital space. He spent 9 years inside the machine Zuckerberg was building. He had access to every resource, every team, every budget line. And in December 2022, he walked out. His resignation memo did not read like a diplomatic exit. It read like a post-mortem, written by someone who had watched the patient deteriorate for years and was no longer willing to pretend otherwise. The word he returned to was waste. Not failure, not misfortune. Waste. The deliberate squandering of capability that existed and was never properly used. When the man who built Doom tells you the problem isn't the technology, it's the organization, that is not a minor critique. That is a verdict. And Zuckerberg kept spending for 3 more years after Carmack left.
The numbers behind the silence. By the time Carmack resigned, internal documents obtained by the Wall Street Journal had already established what the public figures had not fully revealed. Monthly active users had declined to fewer than 200,000. down from the already disappointing peak. The platform contained roughly 10,000 user-created virtual spaces. 91% of them had never been visited by more than 50 people. A content creator who spent a week inside the platform at various hours reported finding approximately 900 people online at any given time, across the entire network. An anonymous internal survey found that only 58% of Meta employees said they understood what the company's Metaverse strategy actually was. Nearly half the workforce building this future could not coherently explain what it was meant to accomplish. The VP of Metaverse, Vishal Shah, acknowledged in a leaked internal memo that his own team was not using the product. His language was unambiguous. If the people constructing the platform found no reason to spend time inside it, there was no coherent argument for why anyone else would. The cumulative losses across Reality Labs from 2019 through 2025 reached $83.6 billion. Against that figure, the division generated $11.8 billion in total revenue, meaning Meta invested approximately $7 for every dollar the Metaverse returned. The Horizon Worlds mobile application accumulated 45 million downloads worldwide. Total consumer spending across its entire lifetime reached approximately $1.1 million. That works out to roughly 2 cents per user.
The exit that rewrote the story. In November 2022, OpenAI released ChatGPT. It acquired 100 million users within 2 months, the fastest product adoption in recorded commercial history. Whatever remained of Metaverse enthusiasm in the broader technology industry collapsed almost immediately. A more compelling destination had appeared, and it required no headset, no behavioral adjustment, no sacrifice. Zuckerberg responded quickly. By early 2023, Meta had reoriented its public narrative around generative artificial intelligence. By the end of that year, the company's stock had risen 194% from its 2022 low. The businesses that had always generated Meta's revenue were growing again. One hardware product did emerge with genuine market traction. Meta's Ray-Ban smart glasses moved more than 7 million units in 2025. People bought them because they required no behavioral change. They looked like ordinary sunglasses and carried a built-in AI assistant. For the first time, Meta had produced a physical product that fit into how people already lived, rather than demanding they restructure their lives around it. The contrast with Horizon Worlds could not have been more precise. In January 2026, Meta eliminated approximately 1,500 Reality Labs positions and shuttered 3 VR game studios. On March 18th, the company announced Horizon Worlds would be removed from VR headsets entirely by June. The following day, Meta's CTO reversed the decision after user feedback, but the reversal was narrow. Existing content would remain accessible. No new development would be commissioned. Vishal Shah, who had once led the Metaverse division, was reassigned to lead AI product management. The Metaverse had lost its budget, its personnel, and its institutional priority inside the company that had been renamed to reflect its importance. What $83 billion actually proved. The instinct after a failure of this scale is to reach for comfortable explanations. Hubris, excess, the danger of unchecked ambition. Those readings place the cause at a safe distance. They suggest the problem was exceptional, contained to one man with too much money and too little opposition. The more precise reading is this. The Metaverse failed because it required sacrifice from the user and offered nothing sufficiently compelling in return. Every technology that has genuinely reshaped behavior, the smartphone, search, social media itself, reduced friction. It made something people already wanted easier to access. Horizon Worlds ran the opposite direction. It asked people to add weight to their lives, a device on their face, hours spent inside a world that looked worse than what they could already access on a screen they owned. Zuckerberg was not wrong that the next computing platform matters. He was not wrong that dependence on Apple and Google represented a structural vulnerability. The 2021 iOS update proved that with precision. What he miscalculated was what people would be willing to endure to reach the alternative he was building. And the cost of that miscalculation, $83.6 billion, 21,000 jobs, and a company that now carries a name it can no longer fully explain, is what happens when the person writing the checks has no one left in the room willing to say clearly, "This isn't working." Neal Stephenson invented the Metaverse as a world where society had already surrendered. He meant it as a warning about where civilizations end up when they stop investing in reality. In the end, it was Zuckerberg who surrendered first.